Kid, you heard of ARTFIGHT? ARTFIGHT is an online art training game that runs every year during the month of July. In it, you get assorted one of two teams, which get funky new names each year, and where you then attack the other team by drawing beautiful, gorgeous art of their OCs. This gets you points for your team, and by the end of July, whichever team has the most points win. It's an event I've absolutely fallen in love with, and so has hundreds of thousands of other artists, as the event has grown over time from being run on a pet type forum with only a small amount of participants to getting its own website with millions of attacks being made year after year. Now this is where I come in. You see, there's this term known as a mass attack in ARTFIGHT, meaning you gather multiple different OCs from different creators and all include them in the same art piece. This gets you a bunch of points, but it's also especially challenging and time consuming to do. And I cannot stop myself from making them. This is the one I did in 2022, featuring only demon OCs and slamming them all together in a casino. It's a bunch of fun, and it's become a bit of a tradition for me to do a new one each year. So today, my dear friends, I will be showing you last year's version. Yep. This video was meant to come out over a year ago, but life decided to pat my head gently with a bat. So we're getting around to it now. Now in this piece with hilariously many characters, I of course need some kind of theme. And that theme is Danganronpa. Oh, what's that? You don't know what Danganronpa is? Speed round! Danganronpa is a Japanese visual novel franchise created by
Kazutaka Kodaka.
Each game follows a similar premise. 15 students find themselves trapped inside a mysterious school with no way out. Each student has their own skill that they are the ultimate of. Think ultimate cook, ultimate writer, you get the deal. During their time here, the students try and find a way out, whilst an insane teddy bear makes a killing game out of them. The entire game is shrouded in mystery, and when a murder does occur, you must solve who done it. The games are known for their interesting character designs, alluring world, as well as at times depressing themes while somehow remaining incredibly goofy. This is what I will be imitating in my art piece. It is a murder mystery! Dun dun dun! So now that you know the basics leading into the video, let's head into the planning phase. Given that this is the biggest drawing I have ever done, I need to ready myself before I head into battle. This means having a general idea for a composition, background, and what's going to be happening in it. So listen up! Here's my plan. Within Danganronpa, there's an iconic shot that I intend to replicate. That being the shot of the first body being discovered. Usually there's a neat little animation with all its gory goodness, although the blood is made pink for censoring purposes, in which the main character discovers the body. After that, there's then an investigation where all of the students try to gather clues. And I want to draw that very shot. Everyone having discovered the crime scene after the very first murder. But Cozy, who's been murdered, you might ask? Well, it's time to find the students. This next bit was a little bit of a challenge, because I had to find 15 different artist OCs who all had to be fan inserts of a Danganronpa game. My biggest help here, when scrolling through the characters in ARTFIGHT, was keeping an eye on the tags as well as using them to search. Usually people would include some variant of Dangan OC in them. This helped massively, as I was able to find a bunch of super cool characters in not that long. I'll explain more about the characters I picked in the next segment, but for now let's head into the drawing time-lapse. My first challenge was coming up with a compelling composition that somehow showed off each and every character, whilst also including hints of the murderer and playing off of each character's unique quirks with fun character interactions. Planning out the whole piece and who stands where is definitely my favorite part of the whole process, and always challenges my creativity a very good bit. For this piece I ended up having all of the characters standing in a bit of a circle surrounding the body. My hope was to draw in the eye with the perspective, and I made sure that nothing was obstructing the body's silhouette for clarity. This kind of also gave the eye somewhere to rest from all the other chaos of the piece. In the beginning I use a fake red brush to make sure I keep everything loose and I don't end up delving into too many details. My focus has to be on the composition for now. This part also features a lot of tweaking with each character's location to figure out the perspective properly, as I am by no means a master of that yet. An important note as well when working on this big of a piece is giving yourself a canvas with a big enough resolution. There's nothing worse than not being able to draw the details you want properly because you ran out of pixels to do so. Remember that you can always scale down later, but not so easily up. After I was done with the rough sketch, I move into refining it. In this, I wanted to experiment with a technique I'd seen in which you blur your original sketch underneath a little bit so that you're not simply following the lines, but still thinking of the overall shape of it. This I feel like helped me a lot on this big of a piece as I tried to focus on one area at a time. I would also sometimes turn off the layers of all the other characters to focus on the details of one, which is why the background sometimes flashes white a lot. Alright, moving on to the students/characters. The first girl is actually the one I know the least about. Usually for all the characters, I did my best to figure out as much information about them as possible. I'd write down their ultimates, I went down their toy house links if they had any, and so on. But for this character, there was absolutely no information. So all I had to go off of was their images, in which I would say she looked mildly insane. I therefore decided to pop her in the front of the piece, covering her mouth in shock, except she's really just hiding her smile. Maybe she enjoys the chaos of the situation a little bit, who knows. Oh, also, I should mention that about half of all the characters included in this drawing have since been privated or taken down, which is quite common. As artists grow and make new characters, they often take down their older ones. But because of that, it's important to note how my portrayal of each of these characters is purely based off of the information available to me in 2023. Some of the artists may not identify with their character or the version of the character that I have drawn within this piece any longer, which is completely understandable. I therefore recommend checking out any artists that you might find interesting within this and see what their newer art or characters look like instead. The next girl is the ultimate Italian chef. She is both cheerful and talkative, and she loves to cook for everyone. Although behind the bright exterior, she has a bit of a cannibalistic tendency, secretly wondering who in the room would make for the best meal. Because of this unusual character trait, I thought it would be funny if she clearly immediately swooped in for a bite when she saw the crime scene. Call it stress eating, if you will. However, to her surprise, when she bit into the victim's leg, nothing came out but cotton. Weird. I wanted to make the story I just told visually understandable too, so I had her spit out the little cotton mouthful into her hand, showing it to the nearby girl. I also ended up using the help of a 3D model for the hand, as I was struggling quite a bit with the pose. Overall, I quite like how she came out though. Next up is the actual victim within this murder mystery, the ultimate dog sled racer, which is such a funny talent. I actually ended up messaging the artist beforehand if they were like cool with me drawing their character dead on the ground. Like, imagine how threatening it would be otherwise. Like, oh my god, I got an attack on ARTFIGHT. Oh god, the blood. They were cool with it, alright? So we were good to go forward. Since I wanted to keep the goofy spirit for this deceased character, I decided to give them big old X's over their eyes. And I also placed them in the Yamcha death pose, because come on, it's funny. For the character itself, all I have written down is that they are both arrogant and competitive. I wonder if those personality traits led them to their path of demise. The amount of patterns on this character was wild though. I was a little intimidated to start honestly, but with the help of a 3D model for the pose as well, I'd say I got through it pretty well. The ultimate candy maker, which is adorable by the way. Her traits are that she is a little bit childish and can be a bit of a bully as well. I had the idea of her grabbing some candy out of the hair of the girl on her left, who I get to drawing later on, but it ended up being too confusing for the composition, so I just ended up having her react to the chaos happening. Her hair was so much fun to draw though, would recommend. The ultimate merchant. Interesting story about this one. When I went to look back at the artist for this piece, this person's account was for some reason banned, and their account name had been changed to Skibbity Toilet 450. I'm not sure if this person got hacked or what happened, but I've tried to find the original artist with no real luck. Not even reverse image search had my back here. If anyone in the comments know who this artist is, please let me know. I am putting out a bounty here. In terms of the actual character, he's a charismatic and charming guy with a desert lizard pet who is interacting with the ultimate taxidermist. I thought it would be funny for the only character with a pet to be constantly watching his back around the taxidermist. I personally can't help but wonder whether the bunny on her head is real or not. I don't have much information on her. She is simply mysterious. I also definitely struggled a bit on this hand, but we ended up getting through it. I just love this character's design though. Like, look at how cute she is. The ultimate hairdresser. All I've written down is that she's a little girl with lots of confidence who also likes to speak in third person, which is hilarious. I love that. Since the character's eyes are completely covered, I decided to put her in a very animated thinking pose, so it's a little bit more obvious what she's currently feeling. Which kind of reminds me of how some people that work in theater will do this exercise where they put a mask on their face and then they have to use only body language to act. It's a pretty fun concept that ends up with super animated movements. It's interesting how much emotion is only expressed with the eyes. Anyway, I love this character and artist. She was a lot of fun to draw. The ultimate adventurer. An aggressive, bad-mannered little guy who dislikes snakes. He's slow to trust someone, however once he does, he becomes a lot nicer. I used 3D models to help me out once again, as I had already run behind schedule at this point. I had him sitting over the body inspecting the Monokuma file. If you don't know what that is, the Monokuma file is something that the player is given with basic information about the murder. Stuff like cause of death, estimated time of death, so on. It's basically the forensics file. It of course doesn't give away enough about the murder for it to be easily solvable. No, Danganronpa usually has the most convoluted what do you mean type of murders, which is part of why I love it. The ultimate beekeeper, an introverted, hot-headed protector of the bees. I didn't get any of his other references saved down before the character got privated, unfortunately, but he has a scar, I believe, on the right side of his face, and the absolute cutest scarf. I gotta say I love how creative the fandom gets when making their own characters for the ultimates. There's so many different fun characters out there, and it was an absolute delight to get to draw so many of them within this piece. For Benny, I had him crouching down, inspecting the body. Initially, I was gonna have his hand resting on her head, but I ended up moving it back as I didn't want anything obstructing the silhouette of the body. Drawing his little beekeeping suit was so much fun too. The ultimate circus performer. This is another character that I didn't have a lot of information on. The intricacy of her outfit really drew me in though, and it was quite the challenge to figure it out in my own drawing. For her pose, I went with another really animated looking one. For some reason, when I looked at her, my mind kind of went towards mimes and how they act without sound. So I kind of made a headcanon that she doesn't talk and instead reacted to this crime scene with a big crying gesture, without any tears actually coming out, of course. I just thought it would be a fun character interaction. Though I definitely struggled a bit with the pose. This character had so many different textures and clothes. I especially enjoyed drawing her little top hat. I was basically painting with pixels to get the tiny little details on it correct. I also love the difference between the initial red sketch and the proper sketch on top. It looks so goofy beforehand. The ultimate idol. Yet another with very little information. How mysterious. Going off of the pictures, I think it's fair to assume that she's a little bit insane, which is a theme I'm starting to notice here. This character also reminds me a lot of a character from the first game called Sayaka. She's the ultimate pop sensation instead, though I think that might be directly translated from Japanese. Doesn't it look like she would fit perfectly in this group though? Sketching her went quite smoothly. I put her in an uncomfortable or frightened looking pose, as if she was a bit insane, I'm imagining she would want to hide that for later on. The ultimate impressionist painter. I'm gonna start off by gushing over her design because do you see this? I don't know why, I love how she looks. My favorite part is that it looks like she definitely drank out of that paint water. Oh, and yes, she is another character we basically know nothing about. So, I took artistic liberties once again. This one was basically a full body. How exciting. I'm also starting to fill out the right side quite well, which is really nice. It's always fun to see a piece coming along if it's working out like it is in your mind. For her pose, I decided to pop her in I'm imagining a painting based off of this crime scene pose. I think it came across quite well. I also couldn't completely tell what kind of hat it was in the reference picture, but I imagined it was a bonnet, which was a lot of fun. I don't think I've drawn one of those before. The ultimate maid. I think. This character actually has a bunch of information about them, but hilariously enough, I couldn't quite find a for certain ultimate, so I'm just kind of assuming maid. Also, this artist totally nailed the Danganronpa style. Like, look at this. Are you kidding? This one has such fun details though. Like, this character is actually an android. Ooh, I love that. I can't quite figure out if they're openly an android or if they're trying to like blend in among the other students, so I'll leave that up for debate and correction. It does say that even though they were an AI android, they do in fact still experience emotions like a regular old human would, which is interesting. In terms of pose I put them in, I thought it would be really funny if they kind of have like a malfunction or a short circuit because they don't really know how to react when seeing a dead body. So they just naturally resort to cleaning and they're on the way back after having run for the nearest mob. It was fun drawing them in a running pose with a flowy dress as well, if a bit difficult because of the folds. This character was definitely one of the more detailed ones too. The ultimate fire show actor. This is a really cool fire dude with lots of scars, even one on his shirt. I ended up putting him in the very back in just a general concerned arms crossed pose. Although looking back, it kind of reminds me of the had to do it to him pose. We don't talk about that. There wasn't all that much information about him, but there was some lovely art made. Also, can we just really quickly talk about how cool fire shows are in general? I don't think I've ever seen one in real life, but they look so magical and horribly dangerous. I feel like this guy would be from the Fire Nation, a Gryffindor, and I would give him a star sign, but I actually know nothing about them. Someone more knowledgeable in the comments, give him one please. Thank you. Moving on to the ultimate gravedigger, which is just a really funny ultimate to me. She's the ultimate at digging holes. Like a little dwarf, she likes to diggy. I imagine being friends with her would be like having a mole infestation in your garden. I love the design though. She has such a ghostly vibe that really suits her character. I feel like I've said character so many times in this video, oh my god. Anyway, I thought it would be funny if she was really excited to just get to digging a grave, so I popped her next to the ultimate maid and had her asking for a shovel whilst they were off looking for a mop. I like that little corner of the drawing because it's just two completely insane reactions to a crime scene. I didn't really know how to illustrate her asking for that though, so I just gave her a little speech bubble with a shovel in it. And oh my god, we're almost done with the characters. On to the last one. The ultimate forensic entomologist. Do not ask me how many takes I had to do to pronounce that word. All that I have written down here is that this little lad is shy and clumsy and he loves insects. I decided to have him interact with another clue of this crime scene. A small little thing on the ground that only he would notice. A dead queen bee. curious. I thought it would be fun to pop in some clues here and there about who the murderer is. So we got the bee, we got the cotton in the corpse's leg, and a few others I'll be adding later on. Now, do I think the story is completely readable just from this image? Absolutely not. However, I only had like a month to make this entire piece, and so I kind of went with the first idea that came to my mind and then just developed on it as I was already drawing it, adding in more evidence and clues as I went along. I'll be sharing more about the story behind the murder later on though, because I am now done with all the characters! The next step is coloring! With bigger pieces like this one, I have a few techniques I like to implement to keep my layers organized and make it a little less intimidating to approach. This first one is one that I found for a TikTok some years ago, called a clown layer. I start off by coloring in every character with different colors, which is so that I can easily come back to this layer and make a selection from it with the magic wand tool. It's called a clown layer as you have to ensure you select different colors next to each other for the magic wand tool to work properly, which usually ends up making it look very bright and colorful, like a clown. After I had colored in each character, I then hide the clown layer and then just use the selections from it in the future to focus on one character at a time. I also decided to organize the coloring layers for this piece into 3 main layers that I then each alpha locked. The hair, the skin, and the clothes. Let's say I then wanted to color in the victim's hair. I would select her with the magic wand tool through the clown layer and then move over to the hair layer that had already been alpha locked, which made it easier to focus on one area at a time for both coloring and rendering. This means that every single character's hair was on the same layer and their skin and clothes on 2 other layers, which is why the clown layer was essential for speeding up the process using this method. The next step I do is bringing in the references I have of each character, and then directly color picking off of it. This was to make sure I didn't mess up any of the colors and also just made it a lot faster. I would then go in and tweak the colors later on, making them look a little bit more cohesive. This step did take a while as there were 13 characters, all of them with a lot of detail. After I completed the base color, I did a bit of planning and experimenting. I had a general idea of what I wanted to do with the lighting in this piece, but I still needed to refine it a lot. I used a lot of the overlay blending mode for this part, and I also started playing around with the background at this point. I decided to make this crime scene take place right next to the school's indoor pool. After this, I add in the texture for the ground, embracing the 2.5D effect that Danganronpa games had, and ultimately saving a lot of time, as I was running behind here. I think I only had a few days left to complete the piece at this point, so it was time to put in the hours. The next step I go with is desaturating the entire piece, focusing solely on the values. I admit I got a bit overwhelmed at this point, so I decided to focus on black and white to figure out how the lighting needed to look. I wanted to have all the characters be well enough lit up to be seen, as I didn't really want to disappoint any of the characters' owners by having theirs be hidden in a corner. This did prove to be a bit of a challenge though, so I kind of just bullshitted the lighting. I did make it generally appear from above looking down on them, as if there was like a bright lamp in the middle of them. Because I'd only painted it with a black and simply changing the opacity of it, I was able to use this layer of shading and then slap a multiply layer blending mode on it. I then alpha locked it and gave it a blue tone and manually went in correcting the colors to each character afterwards. Areas like the skin I made much warmer to bring out some life in it, whilst darker shadows were usually left to be a purple shade. This was a quick fix that had to be manually painted over in a lot of areas to make it look decent, but it was a huge help to kickstart the rendering process and be less overwhelmed with the piece as a whole. I still definitely use this technique a lot, I have to admit. It's one of my favorites. Around this point, I stopped painting purely on the 3 alpha lock layers from earlier, of the hair and the skin and clothes, and instead went above them to more easily start the rendering. I was going all around the image, adding colors wherever needed, so having to make selections then would only slow me down. I ended up going with a very vibrant lighting, having blue come in from both the left and the bottom, which is being reflected from the pool, and then the yellow comes in from the top lamp and a creak in the door that's in the back, and then we have some pink coming in from the right, and then also a little camera that has a small red light on it. Does this lighting make sense? No. Was it realistic? Absolutely not. However, I was going for fun looking and eye-catching, and I think it serves that perfect well enough. Drawings don't always have to look realistic to be pretty. In terms of the background, I didn't really want to take any focus away from all the characters. I feel like there's enough craziness going on already, so I simply added in a door and a barred off window, as that is how all the windows usually look in the Danganronpa games. They are trapped within the school after all. I also added in the camera I mentioned earlier on the right, which is constantly watching over the students. I wonder who's behind it all. Woo. I'm just kidding, I'll tell you. It's the creepy teddy bear I mentioned earlier. Though I'm not gonna say more, you'll have to play the games to find out what's really going on. Oh, I also photo bashed some lockers in on the left side at this point, painting over them so they fit in better. You might be saying, Cozy, why photo bash them and not just paint them entirely yourself? And listen, I was doing an all-nighter at this point, and I had mere hours left to complete this piece. Yeah, girl was not having it. I needed this piece to be done. Oh, I almost forgot. I also added in a wet floor sign, which is another hint / piece of evidence. Looking back, there's a lot of things that I would change around with this piece if I still could, but I'm still very proud that I managed to make all of this. 16 characters, 1 month, and 1 crime scene. I think it turned out pretty bloody cool. I thoroughly enjoy the chaos of this piece as well, which much like its source material is a bit of a mess, but still so much fun to experience. But I have left you all in the dark this entire time. I mean, it is a murder mystery after all, so I think in true Danganronpa style, I should do a little comic to explain the truth behind the murder. It all started when Yuko and Benny were exploring the place and discovered the school's indoor pool. When Benny looks in his pocket and notices that his queen bee trap is empty, his only belonging left from the outside world. He immediately starts panicking and looking around for it in case the queen bee is still alive. But someone else finds it first. Yuki immediately freaks out and tries to kill the queen bee. When Benny pushes into her, trying to stop her. However, because the floor is wet from the pool water, Yuki slips from the push, making her hit her head on the ground. Benny then panics and escapes the scene, leaving Yuki laying there. Right before nightfall, someone else stumbles on the scene. It's Rina, the ultimate taxidermist, who quickly gets to work, spending the night working on her biggest project yet, completely uninterrupted. She leaves right before the morning after taxidermying poor Yuki. The murderer is... Benny! I'm not gonna do an execution scene like they do in the games. That would be wild. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's the first one I've posted in a long time since I've had a bit of a crazy year or two. So I really appreciate anyone coming back to see my channel again. Or if I am a new face to you, then hi, I'm Cozy and I'm really glad to have you here. I am very excited to share my art here on YouTube again, and hopefully in the new year I'll be able to dedicate a lot more time to this channel. I wish you all a good rest of your day and I hope you all take good care of yourselves. Cozy out.